Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Sirât.
Yes.
I believe I've not seen any other pronunciation guide. I think it's Sirât. And we're told at the start of the film that Sirât is, I think, an Arabic word that refers to the pathway, the bridge between hell and paradise. And crossing it is perilous. It says it's incredibly long and as thin as a blade of a sword. Just as dangerous.
Okay. Interesting.
That's what it was telling us at the start in those opening intertitles. And what the film opens with is a rave being set up in the desert in Morocco. And about 15 minutes of raving, while a dad, who is kind of out of place there, who's one of the few professional actors in the film, Sergio Lopez, I think it's him and his son are the only professional actors. Everyone else is non-professional. They're handing out flyers and asking, has anyone seen my daughter? My daughter, I haven't seen her in 5 months. And he's desperate to find her. And he's heard that she might be at this rave. He doesn't find her there, but he does run into some people who tell him there's another rave happening soon in the desert. And she might go to that one. And figuring that they might be going there, he follows them. And what ensues is an unpredictable, I would say, I mean, there's so much you can't, like, I knew nothing about this going in, other than it's about a guy looking for his daughter, you know? And what ensues is, I would say, for the most part, kind of a road film, crossed with, there are kind of, I suppose, there are dramatic elements, thriller elements, in a way, and it goes to places you wouldn't expect, and we will spoil those things. Butting in here to say, really, really, don't listen to this podcast until you've seen the film. If you have any intention of seeing Sirât, you should see it before you listen to this, before you know anything about it. See it at the cinema. It will reward your viewing, and you don't want us spoiling it for you.
Yes.
Back to the podcast. Some quite shocking things happen, and the shock is partly in how unexpected they are, how kind of explosive they are when they occur. I mean, people in the audience were yelling.
Yes.
Oh my god! I to a point where I thought I never heard anyone quite. I've heard you shout a lot in the cinema, and you yelled in this. But I'd never heard anyone kind of shout the way that guy behind us did, going, "Oh my god!"
Yes.
I wondered whether he was slightly taking the piss.
No.
But I think he was for real.
Yes.
We will talk about what goes on in this. It's directed, I should say, co-written and directed by Óliver Laxe. Mm-hmm. We've looked up his pronunciation as best we can. That's the best I've got. And the actors in it, the actors and non-professional actors, speak a combination of Spanish, French. There's a bit of English in there. There's various Arabic. There's various languages being spoken.
Yes. I love that.
So, I mean, well, what was your takeaway from the film? What do you make of it?
I love it. I think it's really original. It's a film that always seems to be in motion. Yeah, kind of even when the rave elements, and either the sunset or the landscape or the cars moving, or the camera, it always seems to be kind of in motion. It takes you by surprise because it goes where American cinema doesn't dare. Yeah, because a lot of those shocking things are not just shocking in a kind of, I don't know, a horror cinema way, right? But actually they're emotionally shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's possible to read into what I said at the start about there being shocking elements as hearing that. And that's really not what it is. It's a shocking developments in the story or shocking events that happen that are unexpected, but it's not like, it's not, that horror movie shock and gore kind of thing. It's not quite that.
Can we have spoilers now?
Yeah, we'll talk spoilers, certainly. I would say it really reminded me, certainly once the kind of convoy got going to the next rave, it really reminded me of Sorcerer.
Very much so.
Yeah, and then I suppose The Wages of Fear, which Sorcerer is based on.
But you say Sorcerer is actually kind of typical of what I'm talking about, of this American thing, because what happens is the explosive denotate, people begin to be killed off, but they're all supporting players, aren't they? They're all the minor ones. Whereas, the thing that you can't believe in this film is when the sun, and you think, it can't be, right? Like, so there's this thing like you can't believe what's happening. Why? Because it's the son. And this is a film about a man and his son who've gone to find a daughter. And instead of finding the daughter, he's just lost his son.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this happens halfway through the film. And you think, kind of, it has an emotional resonance, really. Yeah. And it's something that an American film, I think, would let you off the hook, really. Yeah. Kind of, you know.
Like he would catch up with the car, pull the handbrake.
Yeah, the son would survive, and they'd find the daughter at the end. Or there would be a lesson, maybe.
The reunion of the family is so important in American cinema.
Yeah, but this idea that he doesn't find the daughter, and he loses the son, is like...
And you are left with this... there's certainly... certainly. I was left with this kind of bereft feeling at the end of what was this all for, the way it ends.
Well, exactly.
I mean, I don't think it's a perfect film, and I think maybe... You know, so much of the film is about the electronic music that underpins it, that underpins those raves, and the kind of the spiritual sort of effect it has on the ravers. And you know, when the one character says it's not music for listening to, it's music for dancing to, something people say about that kind of music. And then when the dad, they all take drugs at one point, and so does the dad, and he is kind of entering a culture and a kind of a way of feeling that is completely alien to him. But he's kind of going into it, and you do feel yourself being swept along in that trance that they're getting into. And I think that there's a kind of overall way of looking at the film that is based on that. It's about kind of feeling it rather than thinking it, because I think there are some things. The loss of the son is kind of unprocessed by the film. You know, in a way that certainly an American film would do something with. You know, I
think it's processed. I just don't think it's processed according to American cinema expectations. Because, you know, the scene that you're describing, is a way of processing, right? And the characters speak about it. Like, you know, he's in shock now, but it'll be a lot worse when the shock leaves, right?
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, so...
But then by the very end of the film, so that you've had this incredibly tense, very long sequence where they've realised that they're stuck in a minefield because they've just lost two characters having stepped on landmines. And how are they going to get out of this? And they don't all get out of it. And so by the end, you've only got 3 characters left from 7 or 8. And the ending, once you see that train that they've managed to get themselves on, and they're going off into the unknown, wherever they're going to be.
Well, and actually, it seems also like a refugee train. Yeah, and it's kind of, you know, through this endless desert, right?
So it feels quite sudden, the way it ends. It goes to black and the credits come up, and you are left, I think, with a kind of... There's a certain emptiness, a certain hollowness. What is that it? What was it all for? Where is the resolution there is? And then we don't know if he's ever going to find his daughter.
Yeah. There is no resolution in that respect.
But I do think that there's an ungenerous way, I suppose, of looking at it, which is they just gave up on the story. And there's a much more generous way of looking at it, which is that it's about the feeling, though. It's all about the feeling. Everything in this film is about the image and the sound and the tone that everything sets, and how images evoke. And I think that ending, you know, there's this thing going on it's kind of in the background of the whole film about World War III erupting.
Yes.
You know, so we see...
Or, if not World War III, war definitely.
War definitely. Right. And so we see the military moving in at the start of that rave and breaking it all up and taking people, and they escape from that. And I think we maybe hear bits and pieces on the radio, I'm not entirely sure. And there's a brief chat between a couple of characters about the end of the world, and one says it's always been the end of the world, and that kind of thing. So there is this feeling of like the end of the world is here. It's in some senses has always been here, and it's a case of accepting it or not accepting it. And in a very, very contemporary context as well, with World War III kind of breaking out right now in Iran and across the Gulf, you do feel like the unpredictability of the things that happen in this film and the cheapness of life. Cheapness is not the right word, because the deaths are felt, but the way in which deaths can occur so easily and so quickly, and in some cases really without warning, it has that sense of a world which is losing coherence.
I don't know about that. I mean, you know, my feeling kind of at the beginning of the film is I thought it would end up being, again, and I don't want to sound so condescending towards American cinema, but you could almost write an AI script about a fish out of water, a kind of a standard average Joe dad. You could imagine kind of that kind of thing, an average, Spanish guy going to Africa, right, in search of his daughter, and then building community with all these hippie, because, the film does have elements of that, right? But I think the thing about this rave culture, which the film underlines visually over and over and over again, is that, that kind of rave culture is already made up of wounded people, right? And the film externalizes it. So there are people who have lost limbs or, arm, leg, or family, or
and they're people who are part of the main cast of characters who follow us through. There's
right.
A guy without a hand, there's a guy without a leg.
So there are people who are already dancing away their pain, and kind of, finding community, being outsiders. And I think you could argue that part of the turning point in the film is actually like in not obeying the law, right? So our pursuit of the dance and of the outsiderness is what gets most of them killed, because what you see initially is what seems the Moroccan army or the army of this country saying war has erupted, all EU citizens have to leave, we've arranged transport, right? So they refuse the transport, right? Which would have gotten them home safely, right, in kind of pursuit of the dance, right? The dance and the daughter, in this instance. And of course, that's what then kind of leads to everything else that happens, right? And I thought kind of, that was interesting because the film has all this commentary on altered states, on prayer, on blindness, on innocence. So the father crosses to the rocks just by being in so much grief that he's not thinking about anything, right? And so
well, he doesn't really know how he does it, and that walk has all these connotations, because that's one thing. There's also the idea of like a leap of faith about it, but there's also the idea of having lost so much already that he may as well. There's all these ways of and also there's also quite a literal, I suppose, way of looking at it, which I did certainly at the time, which was like he is walking that bridge, that Sirât bridge, which is the long, dangerous, thin, narrow way from hell to paradise, where you take one wrong step and a landmine will get you.
That's right. And I think there's also something maybe to be said about the father. You see, like, the film is so interesting because it opens up kind of in interesting ways the more you think about it. So on the one hand, the father is this average Joe, really nice Spanish dad who won't give up on his daughter and is seeking her and so on. But actually, he's so selfish in his pain, and in his grief, that he gets everyone else killed. Because actually, it's really interesting if you think about it. He gets everyone killed. He brings the son along. The son dies. He goes again. He's overcome with grief. He's just taken the drug, and so he goes blindly in search of his son into the desert. And then everybody follows him to bring him to safety. And actually, he's the one that leads them all to the minefields, right? So kind of, this nice, decent, innocent man is so selfish in his grief and, his ideas, that he basically gets most of them killed. But the film does really have a kind of an end of the world feel. A post-apocalyptic world and a desert is almost one and the same. It's kind of, a world without greenery, without water, without infrastructure, and with lots of dangers, right? I did find the moment that moved me most was the moment where the legless man, who's got a very handsome face, I think, begins to perform that puppetry show for the kid. And it's a very, very, very famous song by Georges Brassens, I think.
Right.
Monsieur le Président, il faut que je vous dise, ma décision est prise, je m'en vais déserter.
Yeah,
which means,
Mr. President, I don't want to go to war, I've become a deserter.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, kind of basically that he's not going to go die for kind of old rich people. And I found that, like, it kind of evoked that whole, post-war period, right? And then obviously it also has resonances, at this very moment, to the war in Iran, right? Like kind of, it is always about kind of young men being sent to die for rich people's interests. So I found that very, very moving. Like, moving in one way, because actually then the other deaths, I found them like a visceral, the film works on you viscerally.
It does, yeah.
Right, like kind of, sonically and visually, and through that kind of hypnotism, not only of landscape, but of the way that the landscape is filmed, right?
And the way that the music sets a tone under it, and the it's about editing as well. It's the length of time that we spend with the characters in that trance-like state, dancing, and the way that dancing is shot is really important as well. I think, because sometimes dancing is shot very energetically with a moving camera or lots of quick cuts and things. Here it's a almost static camera. Probably sometimes it is. You're seeing the characters in kind of head to sort of waist or knee, maybe full body sometimes. But the shots are very static. We get to see them for a long time, and you're just with these characters vibing. Like the dancing is not complicated. It's rave type dancing. They're just in the headspace of the music. We spend so long in it, and the music is wonderfully produced. In fact, we should say who did the music, which is Kangding Ray. Is the stage name of the producer. I'd never heard of him, and I thought it's amazing music, and it does have that trippy sort of quality to it. And it's it's the space that it puts you in, the kind of emotional space that it puts you in, taking this time to do it and filming it the way it's been filmed, that means that when she takes one wrong step and steps on a landmine, it is that much more shocking than it would be otherwise. Because the death of the son is built up to.
Yeah.
We don't see exactly how it's going to happen, because there's a thing about playing with the ball outside of the car by the ledge. They're up on a high mountain road. So we think, is the dog going to go over the edge or something? But we're told no, the kid gets in the car, but the kid's still playing with the dog, and it's just that he lets the handbrake go and doesn't realise, and before it seconds pass, and he's gone over the cliff, and so it's built up to, but it's also out of nowhere because we didn't see exactly how it was going to happen, and it's very shocking to have seen it happen. The death of the girl who steps on the first landmine,
Jade, is it?
Jade, I think, comes really out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But then the other landmine deaths are built up to it, at least in the sense that we have seen one already, and we realise there are landmines around.
Yes. I mean, I think the ending is interesting because, you do wonder. So there's three characters. They no longer have trucks. They no longer have provisions. They no longer have tents. And they're in the middle of the desert. I would just have expected them all to die walking or something, right? Like, so the thing about the train, does come as a bit of a surprise, right?
Well, we had seen train tracks in one particular shot before then. It was just a long take of it was the camera pointing down at the tracks and then moving up to the horizon, seeing them stretch off. But they weren't on the train at that point. It was just this shot that gave you a sense. Well, it implied the presence of a train in the desert. It also gave you a sense of a possibility stretching off to the future. But at least the train doesn't completely come out of nowhere at the end. Yeah. You have had one shot that prepared you for that eventuality.
Yeah, no, and it also kind of makes sense. I mean, so it's not what I would have expected, but the film didn't need to tell me how did they get on the train, blah blah blah. How did they did they jump on it, or did the train stop for them? I mean, the film didn't need to do any of that, and I like that. I liked that you do really get this post-apocalyptic, war-torn feel of refugees with their goats hugging their daughters, shielding against the harshness of the sun and the dust of the sand, going who knows where.
Yeah,
rather,
exactly.
You
It's
know.
moving like silently into these uncertain futures.
Yeah.
And everything in this film is uncertain.
Yeah, exactly. It does have kind of like an existential dimension in that respect. Yeah.
And actually, the death of the son is the thing. I suppose an equivalent in American cinema, interestingly, would be, and it happens in a different way, Kevin Smith's film Red State, where he stopped, he broke out of doing his kind of stoner comedy stuff and was like, I'm going to make an action thriller based on the Westboro Baptist Church, and it was like this kind of, there was a shootout at a cult, basically, is what the film is. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then Kevin Pollak turns up, and he's one of the cops. And he dies within like 5 seconds. He gets a bullet in the head. And he said the reason for that was that Kevin Pollak shows up after all this stuff's happened, and you think, a calming presence. I know I can rely. Oh, he's gone. And I think like the death of the son here has something similar, where it's such a shocking event and so unexpected, and you really don't think that should happen. And then it's established that it really did happen after a little bit of uncertainty, I suppose. That you then think, well, what could possibly happen next? It opens up all these possibilities for what the story could do next. That it suddenly ungrounds you. Because up until then, you have just been tracking these characters as they go along this route with a bit of peril here and there. They can't cross a river. They're having to go across this mountain road, which is kind of dangerous. But we haven't seen significant peril up until that point, and suddenly all bets are off after this.
I want to mention just a couple of things that might be tangential. The only name in the cast is Sergio Lopez. Yeah,
The dad.
But he is a name, right? And I'm surprised that the film, doesn't do more with it, right? I mean, you would probably recognize the actor from Pan's Labyrinth.
I think that's the one thing I know I've seen of his.
There's quite a few American films, and obviously it's mostly Spanish or Latin American films. But I'm surprised the film didn't make more of that.
Oh, it was in Happy End. Oh no, a different Happy End.
And I also want to mention the episode with the goat herd, because it's obviously factual, but it's obviously symbolic. Yeah, it has narrative resonances, but it has more than narrative resonance. The presence of a goat herd indicates that in fact there has to be a village nearby. Yeah, but also he is herding his goats in this post-apocalyptic thing where there's all these trucks, that have been deserted, and some house that seemingly has been deserted. But, you get the feeling that once the dust settles and people have finished killing each other, that the goat herd will persist.
That's where civilization starts off again from.
Yeah.
And it does have a kind of religious feeling to it as well. I suppose the dress, and I suppose it's just kind of the sense of place and that kind of thing. Weirdly, he kind of feels out of place because we've been trucks and rave music and so on, but like he's as much in his place as anything there. The other thing I thought about him was, I wonder whether he was the same actor as the child soldier who threatened
that I don't
Jade.
know.
Remember when Jade goes out to take a piss and she's like, you're going to shoot me for having a piss, you're only a kid. And either they've cast someone who looks very similar, or it's the same kid playing two roles. And because there's also, when they come across the goat herder, she approaches him and she has this look, nothing comes of it, but there is this look on her face that suggests, I recognise you. And it's not to say that like that is the same person necessarily, that this kid was a child soldier, is now gone back to goat herding, or whatever it is, but just there's something in that casting and the use of what really, really appears to be the same actor.
I didn't notice that.
That is weirdly evocative.
Yeah, I didn't notice that in the credits. So it's possible. Though obviously it also raises the question that, maybe we just can't distinguish one Moroccan from another.
Well, yeah, that's also a possibility. But I know I'm not the only one who thought that, because I know Jen thought the same way, and I do think I think it's at the very least a deliberate ambiguity that the film has built in.
Whether they're played by the same actor or not, the point is made.
Yeah.
Right. Because obviously that young goat herd would be exactly the kind of person who'd be drafted into the army.
Yeah.
Right. And the use of the soldier is to make him seem innocent and naive and unsophisticated. Yeah. So, kind of someone who could come from the country, right? Who's not used to being around women, for sure, right? So that has a kind of a certain kind of sense. I also think, that the idea of the goat herd, in at least so much of Southern European culture and cinema, I mean, I'm reminded of the Tagliani brothers' Padre Padrone.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's this film that kind of really reminded me of my dad, actually. Yeah, because it's set in the 40s or 50s, right? But it's about, this young boy who at the age of 7 is basically taken by his father to a flock of sheep and say, this is where you live now. Right? And the father goes to visit him, every 6 months or something to bring him provisions and, to collect sheep or money or whatever. And then leaves him alone for another 6 months, right? And kind of, that was standard across Southern Europe, way into the 40s and 50s, right? But it has kind of, the shepherd obviously has all the biblical connotations, right? But the shepherd and the goat herd also have something, foundational about European culture, right? So it's interesting that the film brings that kind of into play, and to play in such an interesting way. Yeah, the appearance in what seems the middle of nowhere, and then the running away from, kind of, what he doesn't understand, or
I would say the film's fundamental achievement for me is the mood it creates. I think it's a film that is more interested in evoking through images and through sound design. I think the sound design's amazing, than it is through explaining everything about its story, because it doesn't. It leaves things open-ended, it leaves things ambiguous, it even leaves some kind of motivations or backgrounds. For instance, the dad hasn't seen his daughter in 5 months and is searching desperately for her, but she must at least be a teenager by this point, maybe an adult. Who's to say that she's in a position where she should be found? Does the son not say she's an adult, she left?
Yes.
So whatever background is behind.
No, but I thought that had the opposite connotation of what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Because the original question was, she ran away from home, and she goes, no, she didn't run away from home. She's an adult.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So whatever the reason is that the dad wants to see her, whatever reason that she left, and the implication is she grew up and left home.
Yeah, but from my perspective, 5 months without being in contact with your family, is, it would lead many fathers to go,
But we also don't know if again, like I say, this background that we've not been given at all. We are left at best to speculate freely on why she wouldn't have been in contact for 5 months. Has something happened to her, or is there a very good reason she's not been in contact? We don't know, and we never will.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think the film does leave things very interestingly open. You see, what I was kind of wondering was, where's the mother in this?
Yeah. There's no. I don't think there's even a line about the mother.
Yeah, there's nothing on that. The father and son seem to have a very easy, very good, very loving relationship. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it kind of puts certain things to the side for me. Questions of abuse, kind of. But yes, it's open-ended. I mean, I agree up to a point. I mean, I think the film is astonishing in terms of tone, right? And in terms of keeping things moving, and in terms of, creating these visceral relations between the spectator and the film. Not all of which are explosive, kind of, so, I mean, I found myself just moving my body a lot to the film. Right? But I also don't want to diminish, questions of meaning, right? Like, I mean, I'm not sure about them, right? But it's certainly kind of a film that gets you to think about all of these things. Yeah, and, a lot of the things that we've discussed, right? Like families, imagined families, kind of, wounded people, existential questions, post-apocalyptic kind of conditions, foreignness, Yeah, kind of. It's very interesting that in this film that is ostensibly set in Morocco, kind of, the only Moroccans we see are soldiers and goat herders.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, our main cast is all European.
Yeah. And the people who sell them petrol, which are with their donkeys. So, the rest of the cast is really, kind of European, so that, it is a kind of, it's people. It's not just the father who's like a fish out of water. I mean, he's a fish out of water in terms of not being part of the rave culture, but all of them are kind of refugees or exiles from their own cultures and their own communities, and so I think kind of nothing to me in the film seems accidental. They're kind of these are ideas and they're worked through and they're kind of symbolized. And of course it's not fixed. It's not like X means Y, right? But there's too much in it that seems too precisely thought, even though it's open-ended, to put questions of meaning just simply to the side. Yeah,
and so that's like ultimately what I'm left with is saying this is a film that is operating very deeply on a level of feeling and evocation and mood, and the best way to see it is before you've listened to this podcast, knowing nothing about what actually happened, because those surprises and shocks.
Actually, we should put that. Don't listen until after you see the film.
Yeah,
let's put warning. Like we should be explicit this time.
And I really think you should see it. I mean, be prepared for the unexpected.
I mean,
but it rewards a cinema viewing.
I didn't know this director's previous work. Right, I think he's made films before. I think this might be.
I think this is 4.
Yeah, but so this is the first of his works that I see, but I think it's really quite astonishing, actually.
We should talk about its awards just briefly as well. At Cannes, it was nominated for the Palme d'Or, won the jury prize, won the Prix de Cinéma Art et Essai.
Yes.
Don't know what that. What's that? Give me a translation.
After essay means essay, I suppose, has a kind of a connotation of craft and also a trying, experimental.
Okay, effort. Won the Cannes Soundtrack Award and the Palm Dog Grand Jury Prize for the 2 dogs in the film, Pippa and Lupita. There's a number of other awards dues that have mentioned it, and in particular the Goya Awards.
Yes.
These are the Spanish Oscars, essentially, you were telling me. And it's nominated for 11, and it won 6 of them, including Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, Best Editing, Production Supervision, Art Direction, and Sound.
I think the interesting thing for me in terms of the reception is that it's made so many top 10 lists internationally from all the major magazines and so on, and actually was ranked top film of the year by really respected critics like Justin Chang in the New Yorker. So kind of there's what's the word? It's not just an individual liking the film. There seems to be a wave of recognition for the film. Well, on that note, highly recommend it.
Yep.
Thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.